Hey everyone, Tin Man here, and we've got a update to Dota Underlords, the first balance patch after the big update, and it's called the update in which there's more gloating. I guess they've added some kind of new taunt features or something like that. Let's find out what we've got. So, in the general section, they have brought back hero display on the defeat screen. I think that's actually been implemented already, where you see the breakdown of what damage was dealt to you and by who. That was a little bit unclear before, the way the damage from the Underlords worked out and everything. So I'm glad to see that has been clarified. Fixed an item equip issue that was occasionally bugged with Aegis triggers or Divine Rapier. Fixed some crashes, but there are some other than just bug fixes, there are some pretty impactful things. So first off, they fixed matches that would not normally grant XP, or granting XP towards your battle pass. The proto pass will get you XP. They added the scoreboard back into duos, and this was one of my biggest complaints with the duo mode so far. I mean, duo modes is a ton of fun. Absolutely would highly recommend it. But the problem was you couldn't actually see like the list of what your opponents had and what units they were building, so you couldn't really know what strategies were open, and you had to like manually click each person. It was just a mess. And especially with 16 players in the game, it was really horrible. So I'm glad they put that back in. That is a very big quality of life to playing duos. They've also increased the post-combat time slightly for all players. And for those of you who don't know how this worked, basically at the end of the round, you've got a few extra seconds and you can take units off your bench, put them onto the board, and then use that free bench space to buy more units out of the shop before it refreshes for the next round. So essentially, at the end of the round, you can use this post-combat time to have a bigger bench temporarily. You still, going into the next preparation phase when the shop refreshes, you still have to get your board down to the correct size and sell off and clear up your bench, but it basically gives you a little bit of extra time every turn to utilize that. You can definitely debate that that's not really like a great gameplay pattern and that they should get rid of that completely and just say you don't get to buy anything post-combat, like, or at least not move things out onto your board. But the fact that it's in the game right now and that some people who finish their fights really quick get like 30 seconds of time, whereas people who finish their fights at the very end maybe have zero time at all to use that little trick, is definitely a little bit of an imbalance. So I'm really glad that they're making it at least a bit more consistent for all players, even if it's not perfectly consistent. Still, I would like to see them kind of eliminate that, even though it's kind of a habit that I do now. I'm sure you've seen that in a lot of my games, but I still think it's a little bit of an unhealthy gameplay pattern that they're just kind of band-aiding instead of just fixing it in the first place. Anyway, they added Underlords to the party UI. That's always helpful. Added more duo chat lines. Fixed some assassins not leaping. Now this is actually a bug that I had encountered in the first duos tournament I played. Sometimes my Slark and other assassins that have this leap ability would not leap, causing big disappointment in those fights. Let's see, some freestyle board code stuff. This is the next big one. Added support for custom jails on party matches. You can set a custom party jail by clicking on Create Custom Jail in the context menu within a party and then pasting a board code, which you can get from the freestyle board code. By going into freestyle mode, creating a board, saving it. Any draftable unit on the board or bench of your board code up to 9 will be marked as banned in that custom lobby game. That's insane. So one of the things about the jail is that it goes on a predictable schedule and it's going to refresh every day. My time, it's going to refresh just about now at 8 o'clock p.m. And that's kind of problematic for tournaments that run like if they start before that and then end after that. In the middle of like round 2, you're going to have a brand new jail, and that's like, that throws people for a loop. Any strategy they had, they can't do it. It changes up. And in the custom lobbies, I'm really glad they just give you the option to either play with the current daily jail or just make your own. This can allow for some tournaments where you're like, hey, we're going to ban this entire thing, and you can make it however you want. And always more flexibility is great, especially from a tournament perspective, where it kind of answers a lot of those questions about like, well, what about doing this in a tournament setting versus like the latter ranked games. So I'm very happy to see this increased flexibility, and I really hope that some tournament organizers start to take advantage of this feature and make some more interesting tournament formats. That's definitely, like, other than the gameplay issues that are coming, the gameplay changes, this is like the biggest change of the patch for me, and I'm so happy to see it. And they've also done some various other UI improvements. It's hard to say what they are because I haven't quite seen them, but I know there's some discussion around the UI not being so great, so I'm good to see that they're hopefully improving some of the things. Okay, let's get on to the gameplay changes. They've increased the cost to level up to level 9, and therefore by 10 XP, which also means 10 extra gold. And they've also changed some unit odds at player level 3 and 9. So first off, at level 9, it used to cost 35 XP to get from 8 to 9, and they've substantially changed that up to 45. That's a really big increase, and I think that'll help solve some of the problems that we currently had in the meta, where oftentimes the optimal strategy was just level up to 9 as soon as possible. And that's also due to the fact that it was relatively cheap to get up to level 9, but also it carried with a massive increase in odds of both 4 and 5 cost units, the tier 4 and the ace tier units. And so that kind of led to a meta that very heavily about leveling up and a lot less about re-rolling and trying to get 3-star units. And you can say what you want about which meta is better, but basically 3-star and out units just never really seemed viable in this current patch in solo mode. In duo modes, it was obviously a lot more viable. But in solo modes, it never really felt all that useful to go for 3-star units. And hopefully this will address some of those issues and bring the meta back into a closer balance. In terms of the shop odds that they've changed, on level 3, they changed it so that you no longer have any odds of tier 3 units. And this will only affect you for a couple of turns on round 3, 4, and 5, naturally. So it's not the biggest change, but it does mean that no one's going to high roll that really powerful Lycan on turn 3, or they're not going to get a newly buffed Legion commander. I don't know if she's viable yet, but other powerful tier 3 units are not going to show up right at the very start of the game. You're going to have a couple rounds with just one and tier 2 units. And then at level 9, they've reduced the odds from the tier 4 units. It used to be 25%, which is very high. It was a rather dramatic jump. It went 5, 10, 15, 25, when logic says it should be 15, 20, 25, 30. But we see that they've kind of smoothed that out, and I don't know exactly where they redistributed it, but you can see the odds here of 22% of tier 1, 25% of tier 2, and 30% of tier 3. So I like that it's kind of smoothed out. It kind of disincentivizes you from really rushing to the level 9 right off the bat. And instead, a lot more of the mid-game, the rounds 20 to 25, are going to be fought at level 8 before kind of rushing up to level 9 and 10 quite so quickly. So I like that change. I like that change a lot. Now, the other balance changes they've got about the Underlords, Nesix, and Hopkin. And so I think the prevailing theory among most players right now in the game is that Nesix was by far the most dominant Underlord. She was just had a much bigger early game impact and dealt more damage, or dealt about the same amount of damage as Hopkin in the early game, and dealt a lot of healing. So you didn't really see too much Hopkin being played, especially at the higher tier lobbies where it's like 7 or 8 players in every lobby were playing Nesix, and then 1 or 2 were playing Hopkin, or 0. So we see in Nesix, her hype generation passively has been increased, which at first seems like a buff, which it is. But then Martyr's Boon, the heal effect, has been reduced from 8 seconds down to 5. Pure Pain, her single target damage over time effect, has been increased in duration, which increases its damage output. Chaotic Hunter, which was one of the most powerful early game talents that just increased her damage massively, has been dramatically nerfed. The number of extra shots is down from 3 down to 1. That seems like a pretty big nerf, and we'll see if that still is the default pick on that tier. Probably not. You might want to go for one of the other choices on that tier now. One of the other choices on that level is the End of Medicine, where the attack damage bonus has been increased from 25% up to 30%. So this will make it a little bit more viable to forego that healing, which has been nerfed because of the shorter duration, to go for a more attack damage focused build, especially if you're running something like Hunters or Assassins who are heavily reliant on attack damage. They also fixed a couple bugs with Demon's Revenge and Phantom Pain not interacting correctly, and Instant Regret no longer affects Underlords, so a little bit of nerf there. I'm going to talk about Hopkin before I really get into the analysis of the Nesix section, because I kind of want to talk about them both paired together and talk about the balance between the two, since they are, it's choose one or the other. Hopkin, his attack rate has been nerfed. It's went from 0.76 down to 0.58, so he now attacks slower, which is a little bit odd to me, but okay. That was like his main damage dealing thing, so it's a little unusual to see that. Attack damage has been increased, though. There's a whole bunch of numbers here, but basically what you can tell is that the damage has increased by 6 damage total per level. Not a lot. Went from, it's a bit more substantial in the early game, obviously, but by the late game, he used to be dealing at minimum 160, and now his at maximum was 160, and now his maximum is 166, or at minimum 144, and now minimum 150. It's not that big a deal. So it looks like his auto attack DPS went down. His hype generation per burning unit went up from 0.95 to 1.2, and his supercharged cast time has been decreased by 25%. So he casts supercharge quite a bit quicker. I like that a lot. I think if you had asked me before this patch, what do you want to see change to Hopkin, I would have said cast times dramatically increased, or cast times decreased. The casting speed increased. And we actually do see this this coming in with the supercharged debuff, or supercharged buff, casting a lot quicker. 25% is not, like, it's not instant, it's not twice as fast, but it's something, it's a start. Unfortunately, Explosivo is not increased in speed, and I think that also could use a faster cast speed as well. Another change, Hopkin is invulnerable and untargetable while casting Let's Go Crazy. That's the self buff on himself to give himself supercharged. That's good because it was kind of a long cast time and longer duration, but honestly, I'd like to just see it be like instant cast effectively, which is what we see with Nesix with her abilities. Essentially instant cast, or at the very least they don't take away from her auto attack because it's her minion auto attacking, not her, so she can cast time as long as she wants and she won't stop damage. They fixed Let's Go Crazy not applying supercharged upgrades, not applying all of the correct upgrades to him. Fair enough, a little bug fix. Feedback loop has been changed. Before, the supercharged units would gain mana caused by their abilities, and upon casting they deal damage equal to the mana cost to adjacent enemies. But now, it just says supercharged units cast speed is increased by 30%. And when I first read this, I just thought, what? First off, feedback loop was already not very useful. It only applied to the supercharged units, and initially when I read, I thought it applied to all units, but no, it's just the supercharged units. And like, it's so narrowly useful, and like you gain mana from your ability, but then like you're still cooldown limited, and they deal like damage equal to their mana cost, which is like 50 to 100. Like, that's not a lot of damage at that point in the game or that point in the fight. And they just made it an even more useless ability. Supercharged units cast speed is increased by 30%. Like, there's like 3 units in the game that benefit from that: Keeper of the Light, Shadow Fiend, Windranger, right? That like actually want a faster cast speed. Like, everybody else's cast speed is like really quick animation. Like, increasing a really quick animation by 30%, like, that's not that impactful. That's not a full talent's worth of impact. This just seems like, assuming this is exactly what it reads, like you just speed up your channeling time by 30%, or like improve your cast animation time by 30%. Give me a break. That's worthless. That's worthless in most cases. That's like 30% bonus move speed. Like, just not that impactful. Alright, Grease Fire, hype granted per unit hit by Explosivo is up from 1 to 3. I like that change a lot. This always felt like very lackluster, especially compared to like an SX version of extra hype generation talent. So Grease Fire should definitely get a good buff out of that. God of Light is now Burnout. Before, enemies attacked by supercharged units are set on fire for 3 seconds, and after, supercharged units have a 17% chance of stunning targets that are on fire for 1.25 seconds. Presumably on attack. They have a 70% chance on attack. But I'm going to say like the same thing. What? This still does like nothing. At least the first one like made sense, right? The supercharged units are going to set on fire as well. Cool. Plays into his fantasy of, you know, setting everything on fire. So I'm going to set my own guy on fire, and then he's going to set you on fire. Awesome. More fire. Now supercharge is like, oh yeah, you're going to supercharge a unit, and then they're going to have a chance to stun units who are already on fire. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And it's a small percent chance for a small, it's a medium stun, but it's pretty small chance, especially compared to like Skull Basher. It only applies to units who are already on fire, who are hard to get on fire because your supercharged units aren't setting them on fire. It's just a mess. It's just a mess. It seems bad. So to look at this, at the Hopkin and Nesix thing here, I can't make sense of the Hopkin updates. They just don't seem to make any sense. They don't fix his problem. His problem was really slow cast speeds and weak early game impact. Yeah, his early game damage went up, but his attack speed got dramatically slowed. That doesn't help his early game. his cast speed on one of his 3 abilities got increased by a little bit. That's not, I was hoping for like a 50% or near instant cast speed on some of them. Didn't get it, not even close. And meanwhile, Nesix got like a slap on the wrist, a 3-second reduction to Martyr's Boon cooldown, or to its buff duration. It still heals a massive amount right at the start, and then still has 5 seconds of a good AoE, or a good heal over time rather. And she even got her other abilities buffed. Got her hype generation buffed, which I think should have been nerfed, if anything. And Chaotic Hunter, yes, that was a very impactful talent. That was like pretty much default. Everyone picked that one. So that got nerfed. Sure. So I think on the whole, Nesix might be a little bit weaker than before. But like she was so dominantly stronger than Hopkin that I just don't think it closes the gap at all. I still think Nesix is definitely the default pick Underlord. She's definitely still the strongest. And these Hopkin changes just seem all over the place. The developers don't seem to understand like the fundamental issues with Hopkin is that like whenever he's casting these long cast durations of Explosivo and Supercharge, he's not auto-attacking. He's not setting people on fire. And then these like supercharged unit buffs are like just not impactful because Supercharge doesn't come out until very late into the fight. And by that time, like the unit that's casting it might just die right away anyway, causing him to cast for a long time to do nothing. So I hope they figure out what they want to do with Hopkin because right now it's a mess and he's so underplayed and these changes don't fix it. So I had hoped that they would make some, I mean obviously they did nerf an Essex and buff Hopkin, but it's ugh. Anyway, hero changes. Faceless Void, the cooldown has been changed from 15, 12, 9 seconds all the way up to 60. I can't read. 60 seconds cooldown. That is massive. Basically this turned in from like a medium duration ability and just said nope, once per fight. Only once per fight. Obviously substantial nerf to Faceless Void, who is a very strong hero. He would just jump into the back line, stun the enemy team for a long time, keep your own assassins out of it, and keep them safe after a recent change. So they pretty much determined he's too strong and just nerfed him substantially. I still think he's playable, because like oftentimes unless you had a Octarine Essence or unless you got him to 2-star, he probably wasn't casting twice anyway. So it's still probably fine. But yeah, it's good to see that they... Well, the other big problem was the interaction between Octarine Essence and Chrono Cube was that if you had an Octarine Essence at 2-star Faceless Void, he would have a 5-second stun. It would last for 5 seconds. But then it only has a 6-second cooldown because this would get cut in half. And that was pretty silly. You would AoE stun a bunch of people for 5 seconds, and then 1 second after getting out of it, he's casting it again. Pretty much giving you no counterplay. And that might seem rare, but it's really just a 2-star ace with a certain item. Wasn't that hard to pull off, and I know I've had it happen to me a couple of times, and it was not fun to be on the receiving end of that. So good to see that nerfed. Legion Commander, a buff. Sweet. Attack speed has gone up. Attack rate has gone from 0.667 up to 0.8. Now this is definitely impactful because her DPS was just very low, so this will be obviously a DPS increase, but then also it means that she gets more benefit out of the bonus attack damage. So one of the other problems was you can give her all the bonus attack damage from winning duels that you want, but she just wouldn't be able to take advantage of it because her attack speed was glacially slow. Now she has a pretty reasonable attack speed and should get more benefit out of the bonus damage from winning duels. So I don't know if this is enough to pull her into the meta because she was one of the worst units just because she was undertuned. Her health is still really low and her raw damage numbers initially are kind of low. So, but it's a start. It's a change in the right direction. All right, a couple more changes to items. Bonus armor has been reduced on Chainmail. Chainmail was previously like the best item by far in Tier 1, except for maybe Embarrassment of Riches. Reduced from 10 down to 7. Definitely acceptable. Chainmail was head and shoulders above the rest. Octarine Essence, the cooldown reduction, has been reduced from 50% cooldown reduction down to only 30% cooldown reduction. Definitely not quite as egregious anymore since the Chrono Cube cooldown was changed, but still, Octarine Essence was a very powerful item, especially on units with kind of mid-range cooldowns, things like in that 10 to 15 second mark, to get them to cast very consistently. And it was also really egregious on Bristleback, who would just AoE just constantly every second and a half. So it's still going to be really good on Bristleback just to get more casts off quickly, but it should be a little bit less egregious and overpowered it'll still just be strong on those units. And Target Buddy has been substantially nerfed to tier 2 up to tier 3. Good. Target Buddy was way too powerful at the level he was at. The other kind of hidden change here, though, is that this also indirectly nerfs every other tier 3 item, just making them harder to find. So Octarine Essence is going to be harder to find. Mask of Madness is going to be harder to find, meaning that if you want a Mask of Madness for your Knights build with Luna or your Assassins build with Slark or Phantom Assassin, it's going to be pretty hard to find now. So that is that's a little unfortunate, but I'm glad to see Target Buddy nerfed. He was way too dominant in the early game, just had way too much health, was just basically unkillable after the doubling of health total on everybody. I would have liked to see either just a health nerf at tier 2 or, like you see, nerf to tier 3. I do fear this will have a ripple effect and reduce the value of Mask of Madness compositions, though, because it'll be harder to find. And finally, we've got a change to the Savage Alliance. The damage per attack of Savage has been decreased. It used to give 4, 8, 15. Now it only gives 3, 6, 12. And that's probably good because Savages were like getting a little bit out of hand. I've seen things like Venomancer tick up to insanely high bonus attack damage. And they also fixed an issue where Venomancer was gaining bonus attack damage for every Venomous Gale tick of damage rather than just the initial cast. I didn't actually know that was happening. That was a bug that I did not know about. But yes, so a nerf to Venomancer in that regards, as well as just an overall nerf to Savages, who were a little bit too strong in the early and mid game. They weren't really dominant late game, but I'm glad to see them taking down a little bit in the early game, maybe give a little bit more room for other things to thrive. So overall, this is like the first balance patch of the big update. Some things they got right. Chrono Cube, Legion Commander, and the item nerfs, I agree with. Savage bonus, I agree with as well. I think they missed some things. I think they missed nerfing Warriors. I think Warriors were too strong. I think they should give them the Chainmail treatment, drop them down to 7 armor initially. I think Warriors are too strong at the moment, and this didn't change it at all. They were really off the mark with Hopkin. I don't understand these Hopkin changes. The only line in here I really agree with is like the hype generation one and the supercharged cast time. Everything else I'm just really confused about. Maybe the Hopkin's invulnerable and untargetable while casting, but even that I wouldn't have personally chosen that one, but the other two I could have agreed with. On Essex, this seems fair what they did to her, but it also needs to be paired with what they did to Hopkin, and the two of these together just leaves me lacking. It is just left lacking, you know? And the unit odds XP, I agree with that. So on the whole, pretty good patch, could have been better, but it shows that they're at least looking in the right directions. So hope you enjoyed that. Hope you guys are going to enjoy the game as well. I know there's a lot of awesome changes coming in, so I cannot wait to get in and test out all of these new changes and see how the meta develops from here. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.